I broke up with my wife after she demanded to add her brother to the dream house purchase agreement, but her brother turned out to be. When my fiancée GCC, Emily, and I started our relationship, I was overwhelmed with happiness. We met 7 years ago at a CAF GC, where she had just started working behind the counter. I went there with a friend, and when I saw her, I couldn't be JTMT take my eyes off her. She was incredibly beautiful and had the sweetest voice. After placing our order, I kept telling my friend how gorgeous she was and how I couldn't VDJTMT stop thinking about her. He told me that I should just ask her out, but I was nervous and afraid of being rejected. So I grabbed a pen and paper, wrote down my name and number, and when I went to pick up our food, I slipped her the note. She blushed when she realized I had given her my number. That evening, she called me, and we talked for hours, as if we had known each other our whole lives. She was the first girl I ever met who truly made me happy, and she made me smile endlessly. My parents and sister have also met her, and they like her as much as I do. Just to give you some background, Emily and I come from really different backgrounds. Her childhood was tough. She grew up as an orphan because her mom abandoned her as a baby. No name, no information, no birthday, nothing. As she grew up, she never got adopted and had to go through a bunch of foster homes, which she described as horrible experiences. Emily has one cousin, Tom, who found out about her existence and got in touch with her when she was 14 years old. They are extremely close. From the beginning, my fiancé GC made it very clear that her cousin was the most important person in her life, and I understood that since I had an older sister and understood the sibling bond. The tricky part was that she would often cancel our plans at a moment's notice to hang out with him if he asked. She mentioned they both suffered from separation anxiety, and it showed in the way she prioritized him over our plans. There were times when we would discuss future trips, initially thinking it would be just the two of us, but then she would tell me how she wanted to bring her cousin along. Once, during a vacation, he called for no apparent reason, and she stressed out, feeling the need to rush back home because her cousin wanted her there. She also made it clear that he was her number one, leaving me with this unsettling feeling that even if we were married, I might still be second to her cousin. It was almost like I had to compete with him, which was a strange sensation. To add to it, he would frequently call her during our dates, resulting in 15 to 30-minute phone conversations that interrupted our time together. My fiancée GCAO lived in a tiny apartment with 2 other roommates when I first met her, and her cousin Tom would always find an excuse to crash there. One time when I FaceTimed her, I saw him sleeping right next to her. I felt extremely uncomfortable and questioned her about it. She told me that her cousin usually slept on their sofa in the living room, but that night he didn't JMT want to be alone since he was going through a bad breakup. Later, I told her that I did not feel comfortable with her sharing a bed with another man, even if he was her cousin. She argued that the sofa bed was uncomfortable and her bed was bigger for the two of them. I told her that it was weird for him to keep crashing at her place when I didn't VDGTMRT even do that. And instead of going to a friend VDJJATM's place, he wanted to spend the night with her. Emily brushed it off. Emily said I was overthinking it and that it was not a big deal. She told me I wouldn't understand because I was not that close to my sibling. Compared to Emily's childhood, mine was significantly better. I grew up in a wealthy household and had 2 loving parents. I had an older sister that I was close to as well. Hence, when I found out about Emily's childhood, it broke my heart that she never got a chance to grow up in a stable home. This is why I always tried to give her as much love and affection as I could. We had a happy relationship, so we decided to move in together after we had dated for 9 months. She told me how her lease was ending, and because I lived in my own house and was paying my mortgage, she asked if she could move in with me. From the very beginning, I have always financially supported her since I have a really nice job. I earn 6 figures, and she has been aware of this. Initially, I did want to ask her to split the rent, but then I felt bad about it, so I let it go. She was still studying during this time, so I ended up covering all her expenses. DJ books, daily needs like food and gas, you name it. Honestly, it wasn't exactly my favorite thing, but I loved her and she genuinely needed the help. I kept reassuring myself that it would pay off once we both graduated, landed good jobs, and became more financially independent. However, conflicts would pop up periodically. I felt like since I was the one shelling out for everything, I should have the final say in decisions. Once, Emily invited Tom up for the weekend as she wanted me to bond with him since he had been wanting to come and get drunk for a while. I agreed and bought a few cans for him. When her cousin came over, he completely ignored me and went straight to hug Emily. They hugged unusually long, and then Emily introduced him to me. I smiled at him politely while he showed no emotions. He then sat down on our sofa and ordered Emily to get him a few drinks. I use the word order because he literally did exactly that. I was quite taken aback because I had never ever spoken to Emily that way. Throughout the night, her cousin was a massive jerk to me. For example, he looked around our house and told me how I was probably a lazy bum who depended on my dad for everything. I clarified that I worked hard in college to get my cushy job and that I was paying the mortgage of this house all on my own. He then scoffed and started to bring up how he had recently been promoted. For context, he worked at a restaurant for the past 10 years and had been promoted as the manager there. As Emily and I congratulated him, he completely ignored me again and told Emily how he wanted to take her out for dinner since it had been ages since just the two of them had hung out and how he missed going for long drives with her. Emily agreed, and they started talking about all their good times, which made me very uncomfortable to hear. However, my fiancé GCE noticed I wasn't having fun and was being quiet, so we went over to my room to talk things out. Our discussion apparently took too long, and her cousin barged into our bedroom screaming for Emily and saying how he missed her. Emily assured him that we would be right out, but he asked us to just hurry back. In my frustration, I angrily told him to go away. I was really getting frustrated with how clingy he was around Emily, and it boggled my mind that she didn't see this. After sorting things out, we decided to go back as I didn't want to keep my fiancé GCE from her cousin. She stopped to use the bathroom, and I waited in the hall. From there, I could hear her cousin yelling at our TV, and he sounded completely drunk. This is when I noticed that he had been drinking continuously since the moment he arrived. He came into our place and was almost 8 cans down when Emily came out of the washroom. He started to tell her how he wished they could have met at a bar and had a good time together since this was boring, and he wanted to go out. Emily must have also noticed that he was quite drunk, so she told him that he should rest for a bit since he had a car. Her cousin drunkenly went on to say how he hated the fact that she was with me and how he wished I never came into his life. I was pissed, and I honestly did not care what motivated him to say this. I demanded to know what his problem was, since clearly there was no cousin in this world who was so involved in his cousin's life, but he responded by yelling and attacking me. Now I am 6'4" and much taller than him, so I had to hold myself back from seriously hurting him. Emily was begging me not to hurt him while he kept screaming obscenities at me. I gave him just one punch and he was knocked out cold. Emily screamed that I had killed him, but he was only unconscious and she checked his breathing. I told her that he could sleep it off on the sofa until he felt better. Emily then turned to me and told me that what I had done was unforgivable. I told her if that was the case, then she was welcome to leave me. I watched her eyes well up with tears, but I was too tired to argue with her, so I went up to my bedroom and just fell asleep. The next day, when I woke up, her cousin was nowhere to be found. When I asked Emily, she told me that he wanted her to apologize to me for last night and that he was not going to press any charges against me. I scoffed and told her that her cousin was lucky that I did not press any charges against him because he was the one who attacked me drunk. Emily brushed it off and told me that she was sorry for getting pissed at me last night. I accepted her apology. Since that night, Tom has always avoided me as much as he can. Obviously, Emily continued to see him every weekend, but he never came in front of me. By the 4th year of my relationship with Emily, I was seriously worn out from being the sole financial backbone in the house. She would basically expect me to handle all her school-related expenses, even though she had her own savings from all the part-time jobs she had done. Around the same time, I started noticing how she would start acting entitled as if all my support was a given. When she finally got an internship, I thought, well, now she could be a bit more financially independent. However, she would splurge her money on luxury items like shoes or handbags. She had tons of shoes even though she would hardly wear them, and a couple of high-priced handbags. I was still stuck covering all her basics. We began fighting a lot, with arguments boiling down to her telling me not to dictate her choices and me likening her to a spoiled child I felt obligated to care for. Almost a year after her graduation, she still had not landed any job. Her self-esteem was wrecked in the initial 7 months post-graduation. She had given it her all, but the constant rejections probably took a toll. What really irked me was that I had been suggesting she could have taken a part-time job during this time to make some money, but she never went for it. During this time, even though she was not earning a penny, she would constantly spend money on her cousin, or even send him $500 every month. If I questioned her, she would tell me how he needed help, and that I was earning more than enough anyway, so I should not be selfish. The breaking point came one night when her school loan and phone bill payments were due. She called me asking for help, and I lost my cool. I yelled and called her an ungrateful person who just used me for money without doing anything for herself. I told her our relationship was a sham, that I deserved better, a true partner, not a spoiled child. I told her that I had been contemplating breaking up with her. She immediately started sobbing and apologizing to me. She told me how she was going to do better and how she had no idea that I felt this way. She felt terrible for what I had been going through. Fortunately, ever since that conversation, she kept true to her words. She started looking for another job and did not help her cousin out as much as she did before. Once she got a job, she started to contribute to the bills. For the first time, I felt much better in our relationship, knowing that she was now an almost equal partner. I decided to propose to Emily in December last year with the aim of tying the knot in August this year. She accepted my proposal and we posted about it on social media. However, when she was going to visit her cousin that weekend, I noticed that she had removed her engagement ring. When I questioned her, she told me how her cousin was very sensitive and that she would gently break the news of our engagement to him. I laughed and asked her why this was even such a big deal, but she told me not to interfere, saying that he was her family and she knew how to handle him. This was true, so I let it go. I wanted to do something nice for me and Emily, so after checking my finances, I realized that I could easily buy a house for us. The house I currently lived in, I could rent out and earn some money on the side. I wanted to buy this house as a wedding gift for both of us and start afresh with Emily. I even talked with a realtor who could help us check out some beautiful properties. Emily was pleasantly surprised when I broke this news to her. She hugged me and told me how she could not wait to start the next chapter of life with me. Over the months, we have been searching for our perfect house. Emily had a lot of opinions about these houses and was not ready to lock down. However, in the end, we managed to find our dream home with a huge backyard, which is exactly what we wanted. It is also just an hour and a half away from my office, and Emily mostly works from home, so we are good to go. Now, because I was buying this house for us, I was obviously keeping my name and Emily's name on the house deed. However, Emily had an issue with this. She demanded that since I already have one house under my name, I should keep her name and her cousin's name on the deed for the second house. I was taken aback. I asked her if she was joking because why would I include her cousin's name on our house deed? Emily told me that she had no assets to her name since she had no parents and felt insecure that she was bringing nothing into our marriage. So she wanted her name on the house deed. As for her cousin, she told me how important he was to her, so she wanted me to include his name since he was also going to be family with me. I refused, and we had a huge fight. In the heat of the moment, I told her how weird it was for her to always bring up her cousin, and that even though I had a sibling, her relationship with her cousin seemed to be crossing boundaries. Hearing this, Emily burst into tears and walked away from me. Later that night, she again brought up how she expected me to add her name and her cousin's name to our house deed since it was the right thing to do and how much it would mean to her if I included her family. She kept pushing the issue, and I would just shut her down. The tension between us grew as a result. The discussion circled back to this demand. It felt like a never-ending loop with her expressing the importance of including her cousin in our home ownership and me struggling to comprehend why this was even a consideration. I was caught in a whirlwind of confusion, frustration, and a growing sense of unease about the whole situation. Then, last week, I ran into Emily's best friend, Rachel, at a coffee shop near my office. It turns out she had an interview with a company nearby. Now, I have met Rachel several times since Emily and she have been friends since college. Emily doesn't really have a lot of friends, so Rachel and she were really close. Rachel congratulated me on my upcoming wedding and teased me that I was now going to be a married man. I awkwardly smiled. She probed about our wedding plans, and I found myself struggling to answer truthfully. During this time, I had been thinking if I had even done the right thing by asking Emily to marry me, since we were having continuous fights about the house deed. I could not even talk about this with anyone, since I didn't want my sister or my parents to have a bad impression of Emily. Sensing my unease, Rachel pressed for more information. Unable to contain myself, I decided to spill the beans about Emily's strange request regarding the house deed. I told her how Emily was demanding me to include her cousin's name and refusing to back down. Rachel's eyes widened with surprise, and she told me that this was really strange. I told her that this was exactly what I felt. For the first time, I felt validated that someone could see how weird my fiancé GCE's request was because it felt like I was going crazy. Rachel then hesitatingly asked me if I knew the full story about Emily and her cousin Tom. I shook my head in confusion. This is when Rachel spilled the beans. Apparently, Emily's so-called cousin is not actually her cousin. You see, when Emily was growing up in different foster homes, she met Tom, who was also an orphan. They quickly became very close and started introducing each other as brother and sister to other people. They had no family, so pretending to be each other's siblings gave them some sort of comfort and stability. However, when they grew up, they realized that other people found their relationship very odd. Tom would always interfere in Emily's relationships, and her exes didn't like having him around. So this is why she started to tell people that Tom and she were cousins, so people would think that they were actually related. This would mean that they could hang out and spend time with each other without their partners having an issue with it. Rachel told me that Tom's girlfriends would also have a problem with Emily, but when they would realize that she was a sister, they would not mind her much. As Rachel shared these revelations, a mix of shock, confusion, and a hint of betrayal swept over me. The foundation of trust, which I believed my relationship was built on, began to crumble. Rachel went on to tell me how she thought I already knew this since Emily was engaged to me, and she expected Emily to have come clean to me by now. I shook my head and told her that Emily never said any of this to me, and I had been living with the assumption that she was going to hang out with her cousin every weekend. Rachel nodded her head in understanding and told me that she had also found their relationship to be too close. But it was not her place to judge them, so she always kept her opinions to herself. Since this conversation with Rachel, my head has been reeling. I am trying to act as normally as I can in front of Emily because I don't know how to bring this up. I am at a loss for words, and there's a lot to think about. I am afraid to bring this up and find out how she has been lying to me throughout our entire relationship. This might be the end of us. Because I don't know if I can ever trust her again. Would I be wrong for ending my relationship with my fiancé GC because she has been lying to me about her cousin? Should I give her the benefit of the doubt for the sake of the years we have spent together? Please, Reddit, help me. Update 1. Thanks for all of the advice. I now know how to proceed from here. I have always thought of ways to turn a negative situation into a positive one and, most importantly, not to act or feed off of negative emotions. It was difficult to see how to do that for the past few days. For the majority of those who are telling me to end the relationship, I believe that it is the best course of action. Before that, I need to have an open discussion with Emily and hear her side of the story. Otherwise, it is going to bug me my entire life about why she lied to me. I have also reached out to my parents and told them everything. My parents have told me the same thing that everyone in the comments section has been saying. They don't want me to go through with my marriage, and they're glad that Emily and I are not bound to each other through property or finances, so it will be easy for me to break things off. I will update you once I confront her. Update 2. So I finally sat down to talk to Emily yesterday. Confronting Emily was both nerve-wracking and necessary. I needed answers, and I owed it to myself and our relationship to get to the bottom of things. I did not mince words and told her up front that I had met Rachel, and she had revealed everything about her and Tom's relationship. Emily's eyes widened in shock as she asked what exactly I meant by that. I told her that I knew she and Tom were not cousins and that he was not her brother. Emily looked taken aback, and her eyes darted nervously around the room. She stammered for a moment before attempting to explain. She admitted to the lie about Tom being her brother, but justified it as a coping mechanism from their difficult past. She told me how growing up in foster care, they had found solace in creating a bond that was more than just friendship. When they grew up, they realized that people judged them, so to avoid judgment and interference from others, they decided to present themselves as cousins to avoid unnecessary complications in their relationships. Listening to her, I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness. I couldn't comprehend why Emily could not have just been honest with me. It wasn't about Tom not being her biological brother, but about the years of deception and the strain it put on our relationship. I told her that we were about to get married, and she had knowingly continued to lie about him being her brother. When I pressed her about the demand to include Tom in the house deed, Emily's justification spiraled into an emotional plea. She claimed that he had been her constant support and anchor, and including him was a symbol of what families do for each other. I told her that I was going to marry her and start a family with her, but instead of considering me as her family, she wanted to include a guy she met in foster care and called her brother. Emily started to cry and told me how their relationship was just purely platonic. This made me laugh, and I told her that the way Tom behaved around her was not platonic in any way. I questioned her if she had been sleeping behind my back with him all this time, but she vehemently refused. I grilled her and asked her if she and he had never done anything romantic. Breaking down, she finally admitted that he had been her first boyfriend and they were each other's first. She told me how it was for a very short while, and they broke it off immediately when they realized that they were not right for each other. She kept emphasizing how they just platonically cared for each other since then. However, my patience wore thin, and I could no longer accept these excuses. I expressed my disgust at the lies she had been telling throughout our relationship. I told her that I could no longer be with her after knowing what I knew. This made her cry even more, and she started saying how this was why she had been hiding this secret for so long. She tried to guilt-trip me by saying how I was also leaving her like her mother did years ago and how she could not live without me. I told her I couldn't continue the relationship, that the foundation of trust had crumbled irreparably. At that moment, I no longer cared about her feelings and asked her to give me back my engagement ring. The ring once belonged to my grandma and was a family heirloom. I had given this to her with my mother's permission, thinking that she and I could start a family together. However, now that I was done with her, I didn't want her to take the ring with her. She begged me not to break off the engagement, but I stood my ground. Then Emily started to refuse to give me back the ring, telling me how I had given this to her, so now it belonged to her. I reminded her that what she had done to me amounted to catfishing, since she had depended on me financially throughout the relationship and then lied about her so-called cousin. I told her she was not leaving my house until I had my ring back. Reluctantly, she removed the ring while crying and accusing me of being heartless. I asked her to pack her bags and leave my house within the hour. Despite her pleas and promises to change, I stood firm in my decision. The person I thought I knew was a facade, and I did not want anything to do with her anymore. Desperate, Emily called Tom to pick her up. However, when he learned that I had become aware of their relationship, he refused to get involved, perhaps knowing that if he showed up at my place, I would give him a serious beating. Emily had no choice but to call an Uber. As she left, she told me that she was sorry for everything and that she would wait for me. I ignored her and shut my door in her face. The aftermath has left me feeling a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, heartbreak, but also a newfound clarity. It hurts me that my dream girl turned out to be such a fraud and that, in my 30s, I have to start dating all over again. However, I am glad that I found this out before we got married or bought the house. Otherwise, this would have been a much bigger mess. Update 3. Thank you to everyone who has been sending me uplifting messages for the past month. To those who shared their own infidelity stories or offered advice, thank you. Your words have been instrumental in helping me navigate this journey. I will be going for therapy as many of you have advised. I understand that with time this pain will subside, but it still hurts. Thankfully, my sister and my parents have been checking in on me regularly. I have blocked Emily from everywhere, and I have changed my door locks like some of you have advised. I have also installed cameras around my house just in case, though I doubt that Tom or Emily will ever show up. This will be my final update for now since I don't want to be reminded of her betrayal anymore.